This is Shae McKay, bringing you today's topic, a heated debate. Just how much should be disclosed when discussing reproductive health in the classroom, and where should we place these limits? In today's segment, we dive into the effect of abstinence and comprehensive sex education on self-identity, sexual conformity, the long-term benefits and detriments associated with each style of education. Today, these topics are explored with a variety of respondents willing to provide insight into their own unique perspectives.
Good evening. Today we're going to talk about a topic that generates a lot of debate and is very important for adolescents' health, sex education. More importantly, we're going to be talking about the two types of education when it comes to sex ed: comprehensive education and abstinence-only education. And more importantly, we're gonna be approaching the big question: which one works better and which one really helps young people making better decisions? This issue is not only important in an education level, but also socially, as it is directly related to adolescents' pregnancy, the prevention of sexually transmitted diseases, and the general well-being of young people. To answer this, we rely on two articles. The first, titled Abstinence-Only Sex Education versus Comprehensive Sex Education, and the second, Developing Contextually Relevant Sex Education, Lessons for a Comprehensive Review of Adolescents' Sex Education Across Cultures. The first study, Abstinence-Only Sex Education versus Comprehensive Sex Education, published in 2008, analyzes whether the type of sex education adolescents receive influence the beginning of their sexual life. For this study, data from a national survey in the United States with approximately 1.719 adolescents between 15 and 19 years of age were used. Participants were divided into three groups. For this study, data from a national survey in the United States with approximately 1,719 adolescents between 15 and 19 years of age were used. Participants were divided into three groups: those who did not receive formal sex education and those who received abstinence-only sex education, and those who received comprehensive sex education, which includes information about contraception and disease prevention. One of the main objectives of this study was to assess a common concern in the public debate: lives at an earlier age. In addition, the researchers whether teaching about contraceptives could encourage adolescents to start their sexual lives at an earlier age. In addition, the researchers wanted to answer a very common concern, whether talking about contraceptives causes adolescents to start their sexual lives earlier. The results showed that abstinence-based education alone did not have a significant impact on delaying the onset of sexual activity or reducing adolescent pregnancies. In contrast, comprehensive sex education was associated with lower likelihood of teen pregnancy and, in addition, was not associated with increased sexual activity. On the other hand, the second article, Development of Contextually Relevant Sexuality Education, expands this perspective by analyzing multiple studies carried out in different cultural contexts. This article is a literature review that examines how different sex education programs influence factors such as initiation of sexual activity, contraceptive use, adolescent pregnancy, and sexually transmitted diseases. The results of this review are consistent. Comprehensive sex education programs are associated with better adolescent health outcomes. Among the benefits identified are greater knowledge about sexual health, an increase in the use of contraceptives, and a reduction in the risk of adolescent pregnancy. As in the first study, we found no evidence that these programs encourage early initiation of sexual activity. In contrast, abstinence-only programs showed less clear results and limited evidence of efficacy. In summary, both articles come to a fairly similar conclusion. Comprehensive sex education seems to be more effective in improving adolescents' health, while the first study presents direct data based on a specific population. The second confirms that these results are repeated in different studies and contexts. However, it is also important to remember that the effectiveness of these programs can depend on factors such as the family, culture, and social environment of each adolescent. Therefore, beyond the type of education, the important thing is that the information is clear, experience-based, and accessible to young people. Being well-informed is key to making responsible decisions and taking care of your health. Thank you for joining us.
I'm joined here with Red today, a self-identifying member of the LGBTQ+ community. How are you today?
I'm doing good.
That's good. As a member of the LGBTQ+ community, how has sexual conformity and the idea of abstinence affected your self-identity?
I feel that just with the way that the societal norm is, like being straight and just also at least slightly religious, I feel like it does hold a lot of pressure on me to, even though that I don't align with those things, it feels like I still have to kind of conform to those pressures kind of just on a daily basis. I feel that abstinence is good for some people, but I feel like it holds a pressure on specifically LGBTQ people to kind of follow those rules the way that straight people have to.
So,
What I mean?
Yeah, so you're saying that we live in a society that prioritizes heteronormativity as a social norm.
Absolutely. And I feel like it's always been like that, and I feel like it won't necessarily change, but I feel like there's definitely more we can do to fix that.
Do you feel like abstinence-only education prepares students for real-life situations?
I feel like it definitely doesn't, because of how kind of vaguely they talk about just like sex and just things like that in general. I feel like it's they speak about it very vaguely, and it doesn't give people and specifically kids like the proper amount of education to kind of just be safe.
I see. If you could design a health class for future students, what would it include and why?
I would definitely make sure to include clearer knowledge on just safe sex in general and preventing things like pregnancy and STDs and things like that. We definitely need to be more in depth with that when speaking to kids and informing them about the potential dangers that sex can have. And with that, I also think that would be a perfect time to create more awareness for LGBTQ people and just letting kids know that it's okay to be that way, just so they don't have to deal with just being scared in general in life with that.
Well, thank you for your time today. Your responses have been truly insightful, and I thank you for sharing your perspective with me.
Yeah, thank you so much, of course.
But I don't feel like it's necessarily like, I don't think that's a topic that should even be brought up, like if you are abstinent or not abstinent. I mean, you can say like upon the topic when you're doing sex ed, if, you know, discussing what is abstinence and what is not abstinence, you know, and it's like for me, it's a very neutral topic, and I haven't done it. If I had the chance to, I don't know, but like, you know, it's not something like so important that should be spoken about. If you are abstinent as like the person who is speaking about it for sex ed as like a teacher standpoint, it's not important for you to discuss something like that, because either way, I don't feel like your students should know whether or not you are doing having sex or you're not having sex. That's not important to the topic.
It isn't.
We're just talking about the reproductive health. We're talking about the topics, safety, and then the possible ins and outs of sex. Like if it's dangerous, if you do it like this, using protection, and then the possible consequences if you don't use protection. I feel like those are the only real topics you should really be talking about.
foremost, I would have it based on like what you are assigned at birth. That doesn't necessarily mean whatever your gender identity is going to match with your sex, but you still do have the genitalia involved with it. So it would have to be separated by that. But despite the separation, you know, you would still learn about both genitalias, because I would like every student to be educated on both penises and vaginas, so there's no miscommunication. And then I would also like to include a part identities and, you know, how you may feel pertaining to your genitalia, about if it correlates with your sexual identity, if it correlates with what you were born with at birth, and also about how even if you have sex with someone of your same genitalia, there's still the risks that come with it. I will have a whole section about risks and the things you can prevent, like having protection. There's always gonna be the risk of pregnancy if it's penis to vagina, and even if it's not penis to vagina, there's always gonna be a risk that. And then I would also have a section that includes like the societal views on it, like different religions and how people around you might view it, you know, societal standards for sex, or, you know, how people might view it themselves. And then I'll also have a section that includes stuff like sexual assault, the dangers of having sex with certain people, or rape, things you might have not known before, how to identify that. Yeah.
So if I had a health class and my experience when I had sex ed in school, they separated the boys and the girls. Now, I know that can be pretty controversial, but I really think that itself was a good decision, because I feel like when you're in a classroom, there's more of a shared trust among each other and your own personal experiences, that when you're in that classroom and you're discussing the topics, which I would choose like the biological factors of it, you know, it's there's more of a shared confidence among each other. Like I know for us girls, like we would talk about it, but when you're with a bunch of other little boys, they can just be like, ew, that's so gross and stuff like that. And then you're kind of like, you want to ask questions, but you can't, because you're like, you don't want to be in that classroom where there's kids judging you. So I felt like that was a really good decision, and we shared, you know, like other things like that. So I felt like that was a really good decision on our school's part, and I would probably continue to do that. And in the health class, I would include not only the biological factors of it, like the whole reproductive system and things like that, but I would also include the social factors. And, you know, like, yeah, I would do like social factors. And I would also include real life scenarios, like risks, meditate, you know, you can get, you know, diseases, things like that. I know they still do that now. And I would also include the life situations, like what could be considered sexual assault and what could not be. Mm-hmm. Because, you know, imagine you have a younger kid that, I know as a teacher, you're a reporter, like a legal reporter. So if you don't report things, you know, a kid might have not known that something happened when they were younger that was considered sexual assault, that they feel comfortable enough to reveal it to their teacher. They are by law required to report that, and, you know, they can get the things that they need, the support that they need. Mm-hmm. So I feel like going over things like that too would help. Again, in a non-judgmental way, because you don't want to judge the kids and not to also reflect your ideas on them. So I feel like just going over it like at the surface.
Do you think abstinence-only education adequately prepares young people to make safe decisions? Why or why not? I don't fully agree nor disagree. Abstinence-only education could keep kids ignorant to sexually transmitted diseases and how human interactions should work.
So have you ever observed differences in decision-making between teens who understand consent? Consent is informed by your moral values, so if you don't think that violence and rape is part of your moral system or code, then you probably won't do it, and that's influenced by what your parents have taught you and natural law, which is inside of you. So I don't think consent is something that can necessarily be taught, it's rather understood. Do you believe better education could reduce certain crimes and risky behaviors among youth? Yeah, you should inform the youth on the punishment of those crimes, and they should know why crime is bad, and they should know like philosophy as to why we understand certain things to be crimes, and maybe even like religious moral ethic. Have you, if you could advise schools or policymakers, what type of education would you recommend based on what you've seen? Is that only in regards to like abstinence and sex ed?
Yes.
Probably less encouragement of the sexual activity and knowing of what the sexual activity is, but knowing what basic human reproduction is and how to avoid STDs, but not to encourage sexual activity, because that increases likelihoods of sexually transmitted diseases and teenage pregnancy. And to be done at a later age, so maybe like, I don't know, freshman year of high school, when everybody is known to have at least hit puberty. How do you think comprehensive sexual education might change the situation you encounter at your job? Not at all. In the Army, sex happens often and in the field in dirty places, and it has one of the higher percentages of STD and STI rates of most occupations because nobody cares and because you're having sex in such dirty places. And yeah, I've seen it firsthand. I don't think anything would probably change that. Have you ever observed a difference in decision-making between teens who understand the consent and contraception and consequences versus those who do not? Yes, there is a difference.
That brings today's session to a close. Thank you for watching.